This might be a bit fast-paced for some, so turn on your thinking caps. We're going to cover a little bit of ground. We're hopefully going to learn something today, because you know one thing we never forget, we never stop doing, is we become more educated. And what I want to speak about today is actually really trailing along behind what we've already learned. So we spoke about some of the mandates and guidelines and requirements within the City of Toronto. We're going to look a bit further in the City of Toronto. We looked at some of the technology that we can use to create these spaces, innovative solutions for the urban landscape, making great cities green. And then we want to look more at the tree side. We want to look at how we can actually benefit and use these trees in these areas. And we look at that, and we look at this tree in front of us, it's a single tree, and then we starting to understand there's a bit more here than just a single tree. There's the forest. And how do we create this forest in an urban condition? And I want you guys to think about this for a minute. If we walk down any street, anywhere in the world, could be in Toronto, could be in Paris, it could be in Chicago, could be in New York City, how many things in infrastructure improve in performance over time? Curbs, buildings, sidewalks, roads, light poles, pedestrians? Yeah. What about a tree? What about a tree's performance as it grows over time? It's the only single living item in our urban areas that's performing, improving as an asset over time, and how do we treat it? This is when we start understanding it's not just about what's above ground, it's also what's below ground. See, if anybody's walked out during a storm event into a forest and said, gee, we've got a lot of stormwater problems here, probably not. Why? Well, we don't go in the rain. No, in reality is the tree is doing something for us. So we take this image that we're seeing here, we're actually collecting all the stormwater from this hard surface. This is possible, folks. It's not just 5 mil, it's not 25 mil, it's not 2 inches, it's the whole volume of water is going into this tree planting zone and used as high performance trees. This is the game changer. This is when we start understanding how we provide these benefits and how we actually move forward in this industry. I was speaking to a gentleman yesterday, a friend of mine. He said to me, yeah, I'm going to the concrete jungle tomorrow. I said, what? He said, I'm going to the City of Toronto. I said, oh, okay. You obviously don't know what's going on below ground. You don't know what infrastructure has been implemented for these spaces, how we're actually establishing the future of the urban landscape. This is when we start understanding what are the actual benefits of a tree. How do we use them? So we've got improvement of water quality. We've got capturing pollutants. We're removing runoff. These are just listing a few. Now I'm going to focus mostly on the stormwater side here, but this list doesn't stop. So we speak about low impact development. We speak about sustainability, right? We speak about BMPs, best management practices, for those that don't know. And there's too many of them that don't work, okay? I see them all over the world. But if we actually think about it, let's just take what's above ground. A single tree can use over 100 gallons of stormwater per day and root take up through evapotranspiration. That's like 2 55-gallon drums here every single day being rotated in and out. That's not only purifying it, that's using it. It's also cooling. There's a lot of other benefits here. So we times that by 365 days a year, right? That's a lot of water. Number two, if we increase the canopy by 5%, additional canopy cover, runoff is decreased by 2%. So this is what we call canopy interception. But there's all these other benefits that come along with this, right? Carbon sequestration, health and well-being, habitat, humanity, reduction of heat island effect, improvement of pavement surfaces, increasing of pedestrian traffic, increasing the value of these spaces around it. This is a single tree doing its job. So when we look at that, we want to look forward into some facts and standards. And I'm not sure if you guys know this, but the average lifespan of a tree in an urban environment is between 3 to 13 years, with over 50% of them not reaching their 10th birthday. I was actually going to ask David a question, but I decided not to. I didn't think it was fair. See, how long do we actually plan infrastructure for? 30 years, 40 years, sometimes 70 years, sometimes 100 years. We don't plan for 5 years or 6 years or 7 years, do we? Yet this is actually what's happening. So we can fix this, we can change this, and this is our space. Yourselves coming out of this wonderful college and going into these wonderful spaces, this is the game changer that we can work with. So the importance of trees in green infrastructure and equaling best management practices, low impact development. How does it work? So I want to take a tree and I want to change it into something mechanical. Because once we understand a tree as something mechanical, we start understanding what it can do for us. There's three things about a tree. Its canopy, its trunk, and its root system. And those little fine root hairs that you see on this image here are what are taking up the stormwater. They are critical. Root mass is extremely critical for improving stormwater management. Now, if we take a tree and we change it into a mechanical item, A tree is a pump. Pretty straightforward. It's got a canopy on the top, which is a filter. It's got a root system on the bottom, which is a filter. It's got a trunk in the middle, which is a pump. The bigger the pump, the better the performance. Can we all relate to this? Does this make sense? So you start understanding, if we actually improve in the performance of the size of the tree, we improve in the performance of how it works. So removing pollutants, reduction of runoff, combined sewers can be reduced with loading capacities. Now, here we have how we create the high-performance tree. We need to provide what's above ground in protection, which the City of Toronto already does. Tree grates and guards, protecting the trunk of the tree from vandalism, bicycles being tied to it, protecting the root ball zone where we actually plant the tree from millions of pedestrians walking over to top of it and crushing the root ball zone and killing the tree. We provide for uncompacted soil or rooting space below ground with something like soil cells. This not only provides soil for rooting growth, but it's also attenuation. It's the sponge to hold that water over time to let the tree actually use it up. So if we take this a bit forward, we ask this question: are we leading the way in sustainable infrastructure? What does this actually mean anyways? You know, sustainable infrastructure is not just about planting trees. It was interesting because when I got the email, I noticed there's a plastic bottle ban for the college. Great. You know, using recycled products is part of sustainability. Reducing the impact on the environment we call home is part of sustainability. And I want to show you something. This is a picture taken in Kelowna, BC. This is there's an ice rink in the background, which you can see there. And you look at this image, and we say, okay, 2 rows of trees planted the same days. Which ones are actually providing a bit of infrastructure benefits? It's pretty straightforward, right? The one on the left. The only difference between these 2 rows of trees, folks, is that little strip of grass. So we even provide a little bit. If we even forecast a small amount for low-impact development, we get the benefits of what we see here. The challenge is, how far are we actually forecasting? I didn't actually realize it, but the city, Tracy from the city of Kelowna sent me this image. She said, Jeremy, I think you'd be interested in seeing what these trees looked like today. I think you guys would be interested too, because when we forecast, how far do we actually forecast? And that's what she sent me. Is this what you call LID? Or is that BMP? Or is that, what is that anyways? See, there is a canopy requirement here. Do you see any rainfall collection in the canopies? Do you see any root take-up, root absorption, evapotranspiration? No, there's no trees here. See, this is not LID, folks. Planting trees is not LID. Planting trees and providing for these assets as infrastructure is LID, and using them for those same spaces. So that's why it's so important to provide product below ground. And most of you might not know this, but you're walking on top of these systems all the time. So some of the things that David spoke about, this is what's happening. So these are below ground. These underground soil cells are providing uncompacted soil volume, allowing our roots to grow through them, providing for healthy, large canopy trees, which provide all the benefits above ground. And that soil volume below ground is a sponge, which you can take from something like a linear drain that we see there and implement some stormwater management conditions. And when we do that, we start understanding something. So we've got a tree in a typical hardscape condition. We get a rainfall event. We get some ponding, right? Where does the water go? Runs off into our storm sewers, into our lakes, into our rivers, right? Sometimes it's taking phosphorus and nitrates with it, which are pollutants in the sense of they are fertilizers. The largest time that we get the most phosphorus is that leaf drop in the fall. Those in our lakes and rivers, and we get algae, right? Green lakes, green rivers. Green lakes and green rivers. Why not make green trees? Instead, what we can do is we can use this tree as a high-performance tree in low-impact development and infiltrate that stormwater into that space and benefit the growth rates of these trees. Now, this is already one of the City of Toronto's planting conditions, so we can look at some of these applications further on in this presentation to create this space. But this is how we use a tree as an asset. And what does this asset actually mean to us? Do you realize that a tree is the greatest piece of infrastructure for reducing runoff at the source? It's there. How do we use it? So we look at that. We're going to look at a specific application here. I don't know, has anybody here been to England or Scotland? Just raise your hands if you would. Did it rain when you were there? Yeah, you, did it rain? Yeah, anybody that didn't actually rain, just put your hand up. Oh, nobody ever does. So I was there the last time for 7 days and it rained for 5. My colleague said to me, hey, this is great, isn't it? I said, well, great for what? He said, great for testing. I said, because the more rain we get, the more we can test these types of systems. So what we're doing here is this is actually at Abertay University in Scotland. And we're going to take a tree and we're going to create it into a high-performance tree. We're going to take a 2-hour rain event, okay, with 25 millimeters of 1 inch of rainfall and infiltrate it per hour, and see what we can do in reducing runoff and reducing pollutants. And it's a very simple system. So this is basically how it works. You get your rainfall event. That starts ponding. That goes into a first stage filter. I doubt the pointer works here. No, it doesn't. Which is at the top surface. So that's like a linear drain or a pervious pavers or pervious concrete. That takes out a large sediment and large debris. From there it goes into a second stage filter, which might take out the sediment and start controlling that. And then we might have an optional third stage filter, like a bioswale or a rain garden. Might take us some hydrocarbons or pollutants, like salt, with some salt-tolerant plants in there, depending on how much salt there is. And then it filtrates into the soil profile. And the soil profile is the sponge. It's what's holding it for root take-up, evapotranspiration. And then any excess in turn runs out the base pipe. I'll tell you something exciting. 2 hours later, no water coming out the base pipe. 3 hours later, still no water coming out the base pipe. This tree was already performing a year after it was planted in evapotranspiration take-up by its root system. Now, I think I just highlight something else that's interesting. As this tree grows over time and its root system grows through this system, we get more performance. Last year's rain events that were tested, 19 rain events tested and only 5 of them had water coming out. So that's 100% performance for those 14 rain events, and not only reducing runoff, but also improving quality. So we look at quality, we look at a couple things. Total suspended solids, our big chunk, and I always love asking people, to you, what is total suspended solids? They go, oh, well, it's like little bits of garbage and so on and so forth. It's like chip bags, pop bottles, cigarettes, all these different things. These are total suspended solids. Then we look at phosphorus, total phosphorus, and then we look at total nitrates. The top line is our target. The second line is a rain garden, actually, bioswale, rain garden application, which did very well. The third dark light line is our tree's performance. So we're looking at total suspended solids. We're targeting 80%. The tree removed 95%. Total phosphorus, we're targeting 60%, and the tree removed 73%. And we look at total nitrates, and our target was 45%, and the removal was 64%. See, this is a high-performance tree. And as this grows over time, we're starting to improve its performance. So if there's no water coming out, there's no pollutants coming out. How does this actually work? Now, those two bottom items were phosphorus and nitrates, right? And those are our pollutants that goes into our storms, sewers, rivers, lakes, and create that algae. Instead of having green lakes and rivers, we can have green trees. Now, there's a lot of things that come along with the tree that we don't talk about. Look below this tree's canopy during a rain event. What do we see? It's completely dry. Isn't this beautiful? Now, what are these folks sitting under the tree for anyways? Probably stay dry. But what if it was a bright, hot, sunny day like we get in the summer? Am I the only guy in the world that goes looking for a tree to park under in a parking lot, or does anybody else do that here too, yeah? So, canopy collection of stormwater, wind deflection, noise abatement, evapotranspiration, health and well-being, habitat, humanity, carbon reduction, oxygen production, reduction of the heat island effect. This all comes along with the tree, and we don't even talk about it. Now, you know what's interesting, folks, is this is only what we can see above ground. Nobody knows what's happening below ground. And that's where it's taken up the stormwater management systems into that space. So with that, a single tree, just to give you an idea on the value here, a single tree in a system like this has more benefits than 12 trees planted in conventional tree pits. There is a cost. The beautiful thing about this is the City of Toronto has target soil guidelines, which they've just increased again, which is fantastic, for our street trees. And that's 30 cubic meters of uncompacted soil volume below the hardscape providing for these trees. This is how we can actually start using these trees as assets and how we invest in them and start understanding what tree inventory actually means to us. So we're going to look at some projects. We're going to actually go below ground and look at some projects all over the world and see what actually happens. Because low impact development goes a long ways. And as I travel around the world, I get the fortune of seeing a lot of projects and being involved with them and educating them. And this is one very close to home. This is right across from the Metro Center, 300 Front Street. It's a Tridel building. What's happening here is behind the curb, they have a linear drain. You can just see it there. So the stormwater is falling, running down towards the curb. Instead of going over the curb into our storm sewer, it's going back into the tree planting zone and being used by this tree. Very simple, very passive. It's cleaned out at the surface. You don't go below ground and do anything here. This is all from the surface. This is LID. What's even better than this, if you look behind the planter wall here, you can see another linear drain. That's taking the stormwater on the opposite curve of that and putting that into the softscape garden that you see there. So there's two LID conditions that are next to each other, but not associated with each other. Simple, effective, manageable, and maintainable. Then we look at a condition like maybe a bit hotter climate. I was actually involved in this project in Hatcher Road, Phoenix, Arizona. It was 126 days since they'd had rain. The monsoon actually came the week after. It was quite interesting. In a very hot climate like this, it's critical that we utilize water to the best advantage every single time. If we got a rainfall event, we don't want any of that going down the storm sewer. So what they're doing here is they're actually putting pervious concrete. So you can see those dark panels in these images here. That's pervious concrete panels. So when it rains, it infiltrates into the soil profile below, is used by root take-up, and promotes the growth of these trees. Now in saying that, you can see the growth rates in a very short period of time. The other thing that's exciting about this is monsoons can actually cause liabilities, ripping up trees, palms, trees, and other infrastructure and damaging them. The other purpose is with these underground systems is we're anchoring the root ball and supporting the growth rates of these trees, which happens a lot in areas like Florida. Happened to be in Florida last week and educating them on how we can actually utilize trees for not only low impact development, but reducing wind conditions and tunneling effects in our cities as well. Again, this all comes along with that tree. Anybody been to Chicago? Raise your hands. Fantastic place to go to. If you ever get to Chicago, I want you to check out two spaces next time you go. One is the Riverwalk, and one is the Chicago Navy Pier. We'll actually see an image here coming up on the Navy Pier. But the Chicago Riverwalk, extremely challenging infrastructure project, and they want to use this as a low-impact development condition. So actually infiltrating from the theater, and I'll just show you what it looked like before. Okay, so this is before. This is during. And those boxed out squares there in the rebar are where our tree planting condition is going. And this is what you see now. And yeah, wow. City of Chicago is putting some serious funding into their Riverwalk and using this same space for low impact development. This is a reality, folks. This is the way forward. The question is, how do we actually work within it? So we might look at a project in a bit different condition. This is a retrofit. I think David actually, or someone mentioned retrofit applications. And this is very interesting. So this is actually in West Palm Beach in Florida. Huge challenge with overflow in the residential neighborhood. So this isn't just urban areas, right? This is all over the world, suburban, rural, urban areas. We can have the same challenges. And what we're doing is we're putting an infiltration system and using the tree that's existing, which is on the upper left-hand corner under the word study. That tree is existing. Now the soil conditions in West Palm Beach are very sandy, so you get a lot of infiltration. There's a reasonable amount of nutrient value, so you get a lot of root growth. So this will perform very well. So it comes in from a catch basin application into the system, reduces the loading immediately on the sewer system, creates a buffer as well, and the tree starts using it through evapotranspiration. So this isn't just about new projects. I want to highlight here, we can actually take existing projects and improve them to create LID conditions. And I was just speaking to someone before, I said it's better to do something than to do nothing. So even if we're not sure if the results are going to be 100%, at least they might be 80% in creating that space. So here we get it from a cross angle view. We can see out into the roadway. Our tree there is now on the right-hand side. And this area is strictly holding water and reducing it on the existing system. It's also, of course, reducing some phosphorus and nitrates, but you got to be careful with that. We don't want to damage or pollute the groundwater table. Now, in saying that, we can also look at another project close to home. Anybody been down to the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal? Beautiful space. The whole Queens Quay, just as a note, for those who don't travel, is iconic to other people around the world. I've traveled many countries around the world, and the Queens Quay is iconic. People recognize that as something, as performance, and how the City of Toronto is changing these spaces. So in saying that, this is a low impact development condition. This is phase 2, so this goes up right to Queens Quay. We have an underground soil cell system here, and what we're doing is we're crowning this as a roadway, and the water's actually going to the left side and the right side of the system, and you can see the pipes all coming up out of the ground. This is going to connect into a pipe system through a linear drain, infiltrate into our soil profile, be held there through attenuation, and the trees are going to be used for evapotranspiration and supporting the growth rates of these trees. Now, this is actually quite an exciting project because the linear drains, if anybody does travel there, you don't have to do it in the winter, you can do it in the summer or the spring, and you look down at the linear drain, you'll see a little valve with a turnkey, and it says to storm and to tree. They actually shut the system off in the winter months, and there's a secondary pipe that takes to the storm sewer. So there's some questions about salt loading. I'm going to tell you an extremely horrible saying that I hear quite often, and that's to do with salt. The solution to pollution is dilution. Isn't that awful? But it's true. The solution to pollution is dilution. Or have a secondary system where you can actually back it up. So low impact development sometimes requires secondary manageable systems. So if one fails, it goes into the secondary system. So with that, here's our pipes going through it. So we have to understand how we can work around utilities. Let me tell you, City of Toronto's got some pretty amazing utilities, and sometimes we don't find them until they actually dig the hole. Yeah? Is that fair? So in saying that, we want to make sure we understand how we work with the utilities in the space, because we need to work around it and configure it. And this is what we see now when we walk to this top space. So that linear drain there that we see, there's one on the opposing side. That's taking all the stormwater from this space and filtrating into the zone and being used for evapotranspiration. We were targeting a 100-year rainfall event for this space. That's a lot of water, and it's happening right at the source. So let's have some look at some calculations here. So there's 19 trees. Now this is in Imperial, I apologize. And 15,000 cubic feet of soil volume, uncompacted, of rooting space, providing over 25,000 gallons of stormwater attenuation and reducing the stormwater runoff. We actually have enough soil volume there to take other spaces and filtrate it and use it in that zone. So we can push it up for the City of Toronto and Waterfront Toronto in creating the space. Here's another exciting project. This is in Thunder Bay. A lot of challenges with this project at the new hospital they put in. We can actually take a storm pond and reduce its footprint and use the tree planting conditions as LID to take that stormwater and attenuate it in that same space. This was an engineering feat as far as I could see. So what we did here is we put banks of these systems. The outer lower areas actually hold the water. The center area is our raised island. And then from there, the water infiltrates into the lower zones, infiltrates into the center zone, is attenuated by that soil profile, and is used by root take-up. Now in saying that, there's only 2 trees planted this. You can see the utilities and the challenges in that space, and this is the parking lot today. So we just want to highlight here, folks, low impact development and creating best management practices and mandates and requirements can sometimes take many, many years. But in putting in just maybe one application, like we did in Thunder Bay here, we can start understanding the feasibility, we can start understanding the maintenance requirements, and we can start understanding the benefits that we create in that same space. And as I mentioned about the Chicago Navy Pier, second place I want you to go if you get to Chicago, check it out. This was the first sites project in America. And those that don't know what sites is, it's the parallel to LEED. So we got these LEED accredited buildings. Sites is the landscape side. So they created a new space for sites. That's before. That's during. Now this is on a slab, okay? So this is on the pier itself. That's a 6.5-foot root ball for those that are trying to understand how big this tree is. And then here it is after construction. So this is a somewhat similar project as the Jack Layton Ferry Terminal. And let's just jump forward a year and a half. I just want you to take that image in your head, look at those trees, look at the canopies. And that's 2 years later. This is our space. This is a space we create for pedestrians, for low impact development, for best management practices. It doesn't always come easy, it doesn't always come cheap. But we want to make sure that it's specified and meet the requirements and the mandates for the space, because we can take that single tree and create it into something. And this is actually what's happening below ground for those that don't know. I do welcome you to download a report called Roots and Soil Cells. It's a fantastic report on our website. It will show you step by step what actually happens and why we do what we do in creating these spaces. Because when we do nothing, picture I took in New York City, they call this the 4x4 tree pit. Philadelphia calls this the 4x4 tree coffin. You can call it whatever you want. The tree was dead. I think somebody told me that the average lifespan of a tree in New York City is about 3 months. I think it's actually around 3 years. I don't think they give enough credit. But let's take this root ball out and see what a tree in 10 years does for growth rates. And that's what we see. So what we want to highlight here is when we create infrastructure, we don't want it to go the wrong way. Sustainable infrastructure is not today, it's not tomorrow, it's not 10 years from now. We're projecting for 30, 40, 50 years from now to create this space. Because we don't go planting trees and say, yeah, we planted trees as sustainable infrastructure, and come back a year later, and it looks like that. We don't win awards for this. We don't send our clients to this. We don't actually, I don't think asphalt classifies as a BMP anyways, and that's what's in that opening. So what I want to highlight here is, this is art, okay? This is a picture I took in Hamilton at the hospital there. It literally looks like somebody took and put that tree in the ground. It was actually it was actually there. I don't know why they put the picnic tables underneath. There's no canopy on it. The tree is dead. Is this a BMP? Is this LID? I don't think it is it? So I just want to highlight here, let's understand how we create this space. This is the first tree planted in one of these systems, over 20 years old now. And it is not just growing, it's flourishing. And you can see there's a roadway on each side of it, and there's parking on both sides. It's not just a tree. Sustainable infrastructure starts in design. Low impact development is here to stay. The question is how we design it, how we use it, how we implement it, and how we maintain it. Thank you.